Chucky, Mystic Ritual ends 2,000 words. I don't usually tell this story to anyone, because every time I think about it, I feel the same chill crawl up my spine. It happened to my family when I was 12 years old, and to this day, I'm not sure if we ever truly escaped what we awakened that winter. It all started with a toy. Not just any toy, a doll. A good guy doll. My mom bought it at a secondhand store one freezing Saturday morning. She wasn't usually the type to pick up junk, but she thought it would be funny. She told me later that she'd spotted it, half buried in a box of forgotten items, its plastic face poking out beneath old clothes and broken kitchen gadgets. The price tag said $5, written in thick black marker. The doll's face was scratched. Its shirt was torn at the collar. But despite the damage, its wide blue eyes and bright orange hair made it look disturbingly alive. My little brother Danny was obsessed with dolls and action figures, and she thought he'd love it. When she brought it home, I remember feeling uneasy right away. I can't explain why. There was just something about the way it looked, sitting there on the kitchen table. Even in daylight, its painted smile seemed too sharp, like it was in on a joke no one else understood. Danny loved it though. He squealed when Mom gave it to him, hugging it tight like it was the best thing he'd ever owned. He named it Buddy, even though the shoes clearly had good guys printed on them. That first night, he placed it on a chair next to his bed, saying he wanted Buddy to watch over him while he slept. That was when the strange things began. The first night, around midnight, I woke to a sound that made my skin prickle. It was faint like fingernails dragging slowly across. Wood scratch, pause, scratch. Scratch. At first I thought it was just the house settling, or maybe the tree branches brushing against the siding. But when I sat up, I realized it was coming from Danny's room next door. I held my breath, straining to listen. The scratching grew faster, more frantic. Then it stopped, and that's when I heard Ida laugh. Not Danny's laugh. Something else. It was high-pitched, raspy, like a cartoon character imitating a child. I wanted to run into his room, but fear rooted me to the bed. After a long minute, silence returned. I told myself I'd imagined it. The next morning, Danny was sitting at breakfast with dark circles under his eyes. Mom asked if he'd slept okay. He just nodded and said, "Buddy stayed up with me all night." I looked at the doll on the chair beside him, its plastic smile frozen in place. Over the next week, the atmosphere in our house grew heavier. Danny stopped playing with his other toys. He only wanted Buddy. He'd sit for hours whispering to the doll, giggling like they were sharing secrets. When I walked in, he'd go silent, staring at me like I'd interrupted something private. At night, the sounds continued: scratching, thumps, whispers that faded when I got close. Twice, I swore I saw the doll's head turned in a different direction than where Danny had left it. Once, I walked into the room and found it lying on the floor, though Danny swore he hadn't touched it. Things escalated quickly after that. One night, I woke to my brother screaming. I rushed into his room and found him sitting up in bed, trembling. The doll was lying on his chest. I didn't put him there, he cried, tears streaking down his face. Mom tried to calm him down, saying maybe he'd moved it in his sleep, but I saw the way she looked at the doll afterward. She didn't believe her own words. The next day, Mom put the doll in the hall closet, telling Danny it needed to be cleaned before he could play with it again. He threw a tantrum, screaming so hard his face turned purple, but she didn't budge. That night was the worst one yet. I woke again to scratching, only this time, it wasn't coming from Danny's room. It was coming from the closet. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging down the inside of the door. I stared at the door from my bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then came the laugh. Low, taunting, muffled through the wood, but undeniably real. The next morning, the closet door was open. Mom swore she hadn't touched it. Danny swore he hadn't either. But the doll was gone. We found it later that day, back in Danny's bed. That was when Mom called the priest. Father Callahan had known our family for years. He wasn't the type to talk about ghosts or curses, but when Mom told him about the doll, he grew pale. He asked us to describe it in detail, then closed his eyes for a long moment before speaking. "This isn't just a toy," he said quietly. "That doll has a history. I've heard whispers of a good guy doll tied to something dark, something left unfinished. Voodoo rituals, a man who tried to cheat death by placing his soul into plastic." His words made my blood run cold. "Can you destroy it?" Mom asked. He shook his head. "Not by force. The soul tied to it will linger unless the ritual is completed. But if you finish it," he hesitated, "the spirit will transfer to a new vessel." Mom didn't like that answer, but what choice did we have? The priest agreed to come back that night with the materials he needed. When darkness fell, we gathered in the basement, me, Danny, Mom, and Father Callahan. The priest set up candles in a circle, placing the doll at the center. Its glassy eyes caught the light, flickering red for the briefest second before returning to dull blue. The air grew heavy, suffocating. Father Callahan began chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The candles shook violently, though there was no draft. Danny whimpered, clutching Mom's hand. As the chanting grew louder, the doll began to move. At first, just its fingers teeny, plastic hands twitching. Then its head turned slowly, creaking as if the joints were stiff. Its painted smile stretched in the flickering light, looking sharper, crueler. And then it spoke. "Playtime's over, priest." The voice was raspy, mocking. The priest didn't stop chanting. His voice grew louder, more forceful. The doll convulsed, thrashing violently against the floor. The shadows around the room stretched unnaturally, twisting like living things. Danny screamed as the doll sat upright, its eyes glowing bright red. It lunged forward, but the circle of candles held it back, as if an invisible barrier kept it trapped. The air grew ice cold. My breath fogged in front of me. I could barely hear the priest's words over the sound of the doll's shrieking, a mix of laughter and rage that rattled the walls. Then, suddenly, silence. The doll collapsed, lifeless. We all stared, too afraid to move. "It's done," Father Callahan whispered, sweat pouring down his face. But I wasn't so sure. Danny stood frozen, staring at the doll. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his eyes flicked up to me, glowing faintly red in the candlelight. In a voice that was not his own, he whispered, "Playtime's just beginning." The candles all blew out at once. That was years ago. Danny was never the same after that night. He grew quieter, colder. Sometimes, when no one's around, I still hear him talking to someone in his room. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the sound of scratching coming from behind his door. Mom insists the ritual worked. She says the doll is gone and we're safe, but I know better. The soul didn't vanish, it just found a new home. And every time Danny smiles at me with that sharp, knowing grin, I feel it the same chill I felt the first time I laid eyes on that cursed good guy doll. Chucky isn't gone. He's waiting.